Devin Townsend is an artist based in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada. And I am really honored to be here because you are the most requested person to be interviewed on the site. And it's just so cool to finally be with you after listening to your music for probably 20 years now. So thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks, man. It's nice to be here. I appreciate being invited onto this, actually.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So for people who might be new to you, can you give a brief introduction to yourself and the kind of music you produce?
Sure. My name is Devin Townsend. I'm a 46-year-old Canadian musician. I guess my bread and butter has been hard rock and I guess progressive heavy metal. I've got maybe about 30 records now of varying through certain bands. I had Strapping Young Lad when I was younger, which was really heavy, and Devin Townsend Project, and a whole gaggle of solo records of different styles and aesthetics. And I've worked with a lot of people. My first thing was with Steve Vai, and then in '93, and I've worked with a lot of people since then. And I've done a lot of productions for bands of varying degrees of success, and I've toured and played for years, and
Everywhere, right?
pretty much,
Yeah.
and some places more than others, but it's been a long and confusing career, and I am happy.
That's awesome. So even on your website, you talk about how you have Heavy Devi Records because you make weird music.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and you needed a place to release it. Like those are your exact words. So can you talk a little about what makes you feel like your music is unique or different, and why you might need a vehicle for you to release it on your own?
Well, the record label started inadvertently, as I couldn't convince the labels at the time that what I was doing was viable, commercially for one, but also for the level of capital that I would need to pull it off. So, because the Steve Vai record had done well in Japan, Sony in Japan suggested that if I just incorporate a name of whatever the name was, and dubiously it ended up being Heavy Devi Records, then they would license the work, and that's how it started. And when I put together Strapping Young Lad, and that ended up on the label Century Media, if I could make any claim to business acumen, it was that I insisted that the only thing they had rights to was strapping, then everything else that I did, whether or not it was like ambient or country or rock or orchestral, anything, I would have the rights to do that on Heavy Devi Records. And why do I think it's weird? I mean, I don't think it's weird. I just think that I'm told it's weird. So, so I preface most conversations with preemptively telling people that you may not dig this,
Right.
or people are typically confused about this, or what have you. But I think for me, it's musically, I don't think about what I do, I guess. Like, I've never really thought about it. I go by what I'm compelled to do, and those compulsions tend to be very vision-based and super specific. So I'll do things because that year seems to have certain aesthetics that play into it. Like, now I'm interested in green, and I'm interested in this particular font, and I'm interested in this particular sound and this frequency, and a particular guitar sound, which leads me to another guitar pickup. And then by the end of the year, all these sort of subliminal clues tend to triangle to the point where there's a really specific vibe.
Yeah.
That a name typically happens in the formative stages of those clues coming together. And then by the end, I'm like, oh, I guess it's Key. Oh, I guess it's Ziltoid. Oh, I guess it's Empath, or whatever. And I'm just like, wow, that's weird.
Yeah.
But I knew it had to be that way, and I know it has to sound that way. But I'd be first in line to suggest that it's strange, right?
Yeah. One of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you is because of this book. You wrote a book on creativity.
Yeah.
Can you give a little background on the book?
Well, I think part of the process that I have been working towards in terms of my own ability to actualize my ideas is how do you refine your creative spirit to the point where what your intention is unclouded by any of the crap that you've put into your body or you ingest with media or other people's music or whatever. And that requires a lot of exploration, whether or not it means, I was vegetarian for years, and I'm like, well, why are you vegetarian? Eat meat and figure it out. And then, I eat meat and it makes me feel the way that it did, and then, vegetarian again, right? But it's like, I think that on a creative level, a lot of what prevents me from being just a pure channel to what it is emotionally I'm trying to represent is my sense of self or my insecurities or my ego or whatever. And I think that writing the book ultimately was an extension of being afraid of giving things away, whether or not it's my guitar sound or my production process or what it is that I what my reasons are personally, spiritually, whatever. I think I held on to those things for a long time because my insecurity is just like, well, if other people know how I do what I do, then they're going to be able to do it, and I'm going to be out of a job, and I'll go broke, and whatever. So I think a couple of years ago, when the suggestion to come up with the book on creativity came around, there was a part of me that felt that if I was really forthcoming with the process, then there's a certain part of the burden of protecting that you can forget about. Like, here's my guitar sounds. Here's how I produce my vocals. Here's how I do it all. And then through it, I think what I recognized is that what makes what I do unique is the same thing that would make what you do unique or what you do unique or what anybody does unique. It's got very little to do with your process and more to do with how that process interprets your trip, which no one else is going to be able to articulate. So more people that have it, the better music I think ultimately will become, right?
There are a few interesting themes in your book. One I wanted to talk about is you talk quite a bit about the subconscious, and you're kind of discovering something that's already there. And you almost make it sound like it just happened to me. Like, I didn't make it. This is already there. And even the terminology you use is often work related in terms of, like, perhaps an archaeological dig, or you're massaging something. And I was curious if you think, why are there so many old references to old things? Like, what are you digging up? What are you excavating? What are you, trying to bring to light? Is that stuff that's been there your whole life? Did it already exist? Like, where are you coming from with that?
Well, it has nothing to do with me. I think it has nothing to do with any artist. Mm-hmm. And I'm often maybe critical in a sense of artists who claim that the work that they do is anything other than just trying to do an accurate version of the manpower to honor the source, then it has anything to do with you. I mean, as a person, I think I'm lost and simple. So I can only hope that the moments that I've had in my life of spiritual significance, no religion, but spiritual significance are such where I'm like, well, that's the only thing that I want to represent. That's the only thing I want to sing about. It's the only thing that I want to get right. But it's not that my version of that is by any stretch of the imagination the version of it. It's just middle class white Canadian male named Evan. That's, you have a glimpse of these things, as we all do artistically, and we're like, oh, that, okay, well, through my filter and through my biases and my fears and my hang-ups and the fact I liked Judas Priest when I was a kid, or Enya or any of these things, it's that comes through, and that is ancient. That's primordial. And I think that improvisation and artists who strive to represent these things with reverence, you have to be proactive in calling yourself out on your own bullshit. And I think that for me, my reasons for doing that are not because if I do that, I'll become more successful or I'll become famous or what have you. It's just that it seems like the source and those sorts of fundamental human experiences are worthy of that sort of self-analysis.
Do you feel like you just trip over it? You trip over the idea and
oh my God,
it just happens to you?
Oh crap, yeah. And I mean, not only that, but I don't understand it until I'm on it. So I often fear it, which is super counterproductive to the process.
What specifically do you fear?
Well, I fear that I'm not capable of handling it, right? I feel that unless I keep my intention rooted in something that's fundamentally productive and fundamentally helpful as opposed to destructive, then it's going to be skewed and it's going to be colored by my own ego in a way that misrepresents something that is larger than us. And I struggle with insecurity because I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't claim to be particularly adept at any aspect of what I do. And the things that I like in life, I like my family, and I like food, and I like sex, and I like, the fundamental parts of life are all that I really feel that I can enjoy. And everything past that is just so rooted in fear that the process becomes, okay, well, face your fears on some level. And if it's vegetarianism, or if it's sex, or if it's peering into the void, or if it's any of these things, it's... In the past, I had experimented with a lack of accountability with writing as part of the process of trying to actualize my own connection to creativity. And I thought, well, maybe that's an avenue to explore. And so, I did this record, Alien and Infinity, and these things were all based in me going, well, I don't care how people perceive this. But then through that is a real sense of, well, it's all connected. Like everybody's interconnectedness is part and parcel of how you approach this. Like your awareness of where your throw extends will ultimately affect how able you are to articulate this stuff. And I mean, I struggle with it because it's such a compulsion. It's not like, oh, I've got a good idea, I'll write a record like this. It's just all signs start pointing to certain things, like Empath, this new project. Years ago, I was like, okay, well, it's got something to do with, the cover is like one of those old New Age things with like the whales underneath and then the universe on the top, and then the font is something like Star Trek, and then, you know what I mean? But it's like all these things sort of like the pieces start falling into place. And then by the end of it, I think I've recognized in the past by going down avenues that were, in hindsight, rooted in arrogance or selfishness that, oh fuck, that led me to that place, which was horrible for me.
Right.
And I don't want to represent that. And it's much to the chagrin of people who had something invested in that, like people in the bands that I was with, that we were just on the cusp of success or what have you. Like with the last band, Devin Townsend Project, I was so afraid of the dark that is part of being a human, right? That I refused to acknowledge that it was a big part of what balances my creativity. And as a result, that band started getting this reputation of being like, oh, it's the positive thing. And then people would come to me like I had answers to some degree. Like, oh, what, because you're saying that everything's going to be okay. And I'm like, but it isn't, And then all of a sudden I started looking down the trajectory of what that would become, because the next stage for DTP was more success and more success. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to end up representing something that I'm not qualified to represent. Like, I don't have the fucking answers, like, not even slightly. And not only that, there seems to be very clearly a market for not only telling people, fuck the world, because to be able to rationalize that with a cool logo, there's a lot of people that are willing to pay for that.
Right.
Because it's like it removes that need to like say, no, don't fuck the world. And conversely, saying everything's going to be fine. There's a huge market for that, because everything is not clearly okay. And people want that sort of reassurance and to have it as a slogan on a shirt and all these things. And so I started recognizing, I'm like, wow, again, your fear is preventing you from representing, your truth, not the truth, but your truth. And my truth is somewhere in the middle, right? It's as it should be. My truth is everything is clearly not all right, but I firmly believe that if you're willing to work and recognize that even though there's darkness everywhere, it's up to us to find the joy in that. And even with the awareness of that, not blocking it out, but with the awareness that it is fundamentally chaos, with like a certain type of internal discipline, I think you can transmute that into something that is healthy and enjoyable. And I'd like to be a step in the ladder as opposed to the ladder,
There are themes in the book, and we were discussing before filming this notion of via negativa, where you are cutting away at things instead of building something up. And you use via negativa in a few ways. When you are talking about fear and things not working out in the world, are you using your art to kind of chip away at that, or are you using art to shine a light on that?
Certainly not intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where sometimes I feel like the imposter syndrome on some level, because if you get it right, or at least I feel if I get it right artistically, in hindsight it looks intentional. Yeah. But it wasn't. It was all based in just scrambling in the darkness, trying to take these things that present themselves sheerly as an interest, and then just have them not irritate me anymore. Like when I have a piece of music come into my head, it's finished when it doesn't bug me. It's not that it's like, when I started, I'm like, the intention of this is going to be for this and that, and this is how it's going to help, and this is how it's got nothing to do with that. And I think that's why I have spent so much time being really self-deprecating as well, because I'll have these ideas that are really, they seem to be of a lot of depth and importance to me in my trip. Yet I don't understand them until they're done.
Yeah.
So I
Can you
have
give an example of something you didn't understand until it was done?
all of it. All of it. Okay,
Maybe
well,
something
let's
a
give
little
a
more
practical example.
tangible.
Okay, yeah. Empath. It's taken me 1.5 years to write it, and I consciously went into writing heavy music again for this one, but juxtaposed by very mellow music. And it's the first time I've done it in one place. And the fear of doing that, for fear of people interpreting that, or the ups and downs of it psychologically being like disturbing to people, was such that I couldn't trust that my intentions for it were not self-destructive. You know, like on some level I was trying to sabotage myself because of the self-loathing or whatever, that on some, because I don't feel like, it's not like I'm not in control of it, but because it's, my peripherals are so closed, I don't see it as it's going. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? What am I doing? This is terrible. Oh, it's great. It's terrible. And but then once it was done and I listened to it, I'm like, oh, it's beautiful. Like, your intentions all along were to represent that life is not one thing. Life is all these things. And the last piece of music on the record, the last line is, if you can't shine for you, please shine for me. It's like, through the storm of the record, what was kind of guiding my hand like a infant was this sense that if you really want to contribute to music and to other people and other people's art and other people's frames of mind in a very destructive time, you can't be oblivious to the fear. You can't block it out under the assumption that it will just simply go away. You have to face it. And so by the end of the record, when I finally concluded, I was able to listen to it and say, this is a positive statement. It's a very uneasy time. And therefore, as somebody who's empathetic to what's going on just in his immediate environment, let alone the media and all the shit that we're bombarded with, of course it's going to come out like that. Of course it's going to come out like that. Unless you're being dishonest, of course it's going to come out like that. And your fear of other people interpreting it in the wrong way is based on the fact that you're not a terrible person.
It's interesting how it seems like you live with this juxtaposition of order and chaos. An album is essentially order. The recording is ordered. Everyone's recorded. The mix is perfect. The master is perfect. But you're pointing at and saying, there's still the chaos. You're saying, I don't know what happens. I don't know why this happens. But you have a 5-step guide to creativity,
Well, I think the 5-step guide is based on a very pragmatic, almost parental advice, because any advice that I have to people to wield sounds too pompous, but to handle this type of process is like, don't do drugs and stay in school. You know what I mean? It's like, it's really a lot more about when these moments of darkness and existential trauma comes into your life. It's about practicing real fundamental parts of being like a decent person, so that your heart is bigger than your fear.
So do you feel that you've worked through a lot of this with your art? Do you feel like you're a much healthier version of who you were, or do you feel like
I'm
it's
healthier than I could be.
just different issues?
Different issues.
Just
for sure.
different issues.
I'm healthier than I could be, for sure. I mean,
Uh-huh.
I think I've made a lot of inroads in my personal life. Where I could have gone into very self-destructive roads. Like, for example, drugs are a very tender subject, because a lot of the times the inspiration that you get from, you know, cannabis or alcohol or LSD or ayahuasca or any of these things are such that it's really enticing,
Hmm.
because you think on some level it removes fear and you're able to just produce. However, there's a certain aspect of that it feels like to me that you're taking it out of the bank. You know, you make a withdrawal that allows you to get a riff or something like this, but you pay for it in a psychological type of chaos that I think disallows you from being able to handle the ramifications of what it is that you're producing. So it's a very fine line, like, and I think that extends to coffee and exercise and all these things. But you got to live too. It's not like you can be a monk in this world. It's like if you've got kids and if you've got a job and you've got phones and you've got you're recycling it, you're drinking out of plastic bottles. Like, I mean, all these things. And I think what that comes down to, in the same way as maybe some artistic avenues can lead you to dark places. I think the idea of withdrawing everything from you and being completely like, I'm a pure vessel, is also a type of hang up. And I think what you've really got to do is foster some sort of sense of self-love that is rooted in, just give me a fucking break, man. Like, like, eat a piece of chocolate, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately plays into the book as well, because what works for one person is not going to work for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some people I know that can do drugs all the time, or drink alcohol, or do any number of things that may not work for other people. And so the process...
It may not be working for them either.
Maybe.
You just think it does watching them.
Maybe, but I think that maybe also predisposes that there's like one way.
Right.
And I'm not sure I subscribe to that. I think that
Right.
there's one way ultimately, but I think that there's very much the idea that everybody's at a certain level of evolution. And that, for example, I could remove everything from my life. And I could become a monk, and I could do all these things that seem to be enticing on a real... But I just don't know if I'm spiritually involved enough for that to not be, I wasted my life.
Well, after seeing some of your performances, I'm not sure you'd be authentic to yourself.
Well, this
either.
is it. So the whole purpose of my guide to creativity, if there is such a thing, is that you got to figure out who you are
Mm-hmm.
and what your parameters are,
Mm-hmm.
and then honor that.
Mm-hmm.
But don't lie to yourself about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sometimes the best thing that you may be able to do for yourself is have a glass of wine and watch Netflix for 2 days.
Right.
Like, maybe it isn't. Maybe for somebody else that would be super destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but I'm pretty far from enlightened.
Would you say the first step is to figure out who you are? Would you say that these things that you're describing about yourself is what you've figured out about who you are? Or are they kind of something else, like
I think
boundaries?
I've figured them out only because I've been so afraid of life.
Uh-huh.
So in my journey to not be perpetually immobilized by fear, these things have kind of revealed themselves to me, as opposed to any sort of benevolent, like, I think that my role in life is to... It's just, I'm shit scared all the time, right? So
Is the music a vehicle to process that, or is it a way of blocking it out for you?
music started as a loophole for me because we were raised in an environment where overt displays of emotion were viewed as distasteful, I think. And I think that the downfall of that within my family is there's a lot of people with very, not highly evolved empathic ability, but moderate. And I'm in that category. So you can't feel the need to understand emotions or to represent emotions with such primal ferocity without a loophole for it to come out if you're in an environment where it's not cultivated, or else you're just going to go fucking crazy. So for me, because music, I've always been, I guess, synesthesic, where, if that's even the term, where I...
the neuroscientist would know.
Sure. But I mean, it's like numbers and colors and shapes and sounds and emotions are really connected, right? So as a result of that, it could have been music, it could have been art, it didn't really matter. Music was just a loophole that, because I was in a musical family, I could represent those sort of repressed things in a way that wasn't going to get me in trouble. And then when I found that it became a convenient place for me to put it, everything kind of got hardwired to that. And so now, as I find myself, and this, one could argue that I'm learning, and these lessons that I've imposed on myself are helping, or I'm just getting older. But music and its importance to me in terms of my identity is much less than it was. So now I find that, for example, on Empath, a lot of the theme ended up, again, at the end, being recognized as what you were trying to do is you're trying to let these things come and then not let them define you. So let them bubble to the surface and then let them go, right?
Which is something you cover in the book, where you say don't spiritualize or idolize the idea, just commoditize it and record it, have a system for storing it, and you'll get back to it later. It's not like, oh crap, if I don't work on this, my life will fall apart.
And also, if I could add a caveat to that, if you want to.
If you want to.
Because I think as soon as you say don't, or my method is, or this is how you do it, then I think it verges on the same problem I have with religion, right? Where it predisposes that whoever's telling you these things knows.
Right.
And I will be the first to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
And what I thought I knew tends to morph from year to year.
Right.
And, sometimes, when I was experimenting with eating meat again, it's like I had all these people in my life that were hardcore vegan, and they were hypercritical of me. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know. I've been vegetarian for so long. I don't even know I'm vegetarian. I just need to know. And like, well, you can't. And I'm like, but why? Like, it just seems so stupid. And I mean, the truth's somewhere in the middle for me. And I realize that that by allowing myself the lack of judgment that goes into saying, if you choose to try something, that makes you a terrible person. You're going to hell, or whatever it is. I mean, I don't know. I find that has been really helpful creatively.
Well, and this book is kind of all about that. Like this notion of everyone has their own truth, and popular society may not be interested in yours. But if pleasure and artistic expression is the goal, you're going to have to get over that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it really comes down to, like, just be honest with yourself. What do you want? And it doesn't matter if what you want is something that isn't right to want.
Right.
Maybe all you want to do is make a ton of money.
Yeah.
But I mean, the only thing that, but if that's what's going to make you happy, then you'd be foolish not to like pursue that, because maybe somewhere along the line you'll find that in that path to that is what you needed to know. It's like, oh, maybe that isn't going to make me happy. But I didn't know it was not going to make me happy until I went there. And I think that, it's like Bart Simpson touching the electric muffin. He's just like, ow, ow, ow. Like, I feel like to a certain extent, my process is like, I just need to try it to know.
Right. Well, now that you're a millionaire, you know that money isn't that important.
I'm $1,000 down.
Right on, me too.
Yeah. I mean, I think money's a pain in the ass. I mean, I would love to have enough money to never have to say no to the guacamole, as they say, right? But it's like, I know a bunch of people who have millions of dollars and they just seem like there's so many problems.
Right.
I feel like I've got, in a lot of ways, more than I need, right? And
I heard a great saying the other day. It's a Chinese, proverb, adage type thing. No food, one problem. Lots of food, many problems.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think, again, where the problems come there is thinking, well, that's what you have to do then. So I'm going to get rid of everything. And I'm going to get a white cloak and I'm going to tell my family that I'm the Buddha and I'm going to go off and, and then, but if you're not spiritually in that place, all you're doing is fucking yourself and everybody else that you care about, right? Like, I think that's a really important thing, because during Infinity, I went down that path where I was like, I'm going to get rid of everything and I'm going to go be a monk and,
Is that why you're naked on the cover?
Totally.
Yeah.
But it's like, but I'm not evolved enough for that. It's like, I'm kind of stuck in the Western view of what spirituality is, to the point where I think there's a way that you do it. If I've got more than one guitar, then I'm spiritually unevolved or what have you. And I find that a lot of my problems with spiritualism or religion, but spiritualism in general, is people thinking that, for example, I know a lot of people that are vegetarian because they think that's what spiritual people do. But then I know a lot of people who seem spiritually really evolved that eat meat. It's like, so when you feel like you just have to have the uniform for what's going to, you're going to transcend the birth and death cycle, or you're going to go to heaven, or whatever it is. You think, well, as long as I've got these things, I say namaste a lot and I do a lot of yoga and I still talk shit about my buddies when they're not around or whatever. It's like, I think ultimately it's like, man, you're wasting your time. Just figure out, like, maybe what you want to do is burn around in a race car and like eat ribs.
Right.
And if this is your one time around, man, maybe that's what you should be doing.
Right.
As opposed to just being like frustrated with everything. Now, I think the other side of the coin, though, is the further down you go, I think certain things just don't make sense anymore.
Right.
Like for me, it's like, I love meat, but after a while I'm like, it doesn't make sense for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
But I needed to know that, right? So, I don't know.
I like Robert Fripp's way. He has a couple of ways of thinking about this. First, he says that Tai Chi shows like a perfect form exists, and it's your job to align with that form. Whatever that form is, may be different for different people.
That makes sense.
We need to build the discipline to be able to take that form. And then he calls King Crimson a way of doing things. And I always thought, that is so irritating. What does that mean? But just like you're saying, it's like, this is how I process what I need to do. This is my way of doing things.
I thought you were going to say, just like what you're saying, it is irritating.
Yeah. Can we move on?
Yeah, I'll show myself. No, I get it, man. I think it's like, I don't know. It's. I like my friends. I like my family. I don't claim to know a lot. I like laughing. I like eating. I like. I don't know. And I know less every day, right? So I think that the creative thing frightens me, just because I clearly do know.
You do.
And that's the thing, that there's a disconnect.
You
That
can't not know after
this is the
30 years of
problem.
it,
This
right?
is the problem. So because there's a real disconnect between, the chaos and order that even exists within my creative mind, I constantly feel ill at ease about what I do. And that prevents me from improvising in the way that I hope to one day.
Uh-huh.
You know? I think that once I can make, and I think it comes down to insecurity. I just think like, like I've spent so many years going, oh, I'm an idiot. Oh, I don't know. That you internalize that to the point where you clearly do know. And it's like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, it comes from somewhere else. I don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
But maybe this whole midlife thing. I mean, 46 is pretty late to still be battling with this shit. But I mean, what you gonna do?